Civilians chase trucks carrying flour in Pakistan.
Armed guards accompany the trucks to protect the vital and scarce commodity. Good evening. I am Ricky Mathay.
And I am Nina Richie Alagaw Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. Defense Secretary-designate Carlito Galvez Jr. enjoined senior defense officials to stay in place. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. visits flood-stricken Misamis Occidental. Several injured in Paris train station stabbing attack. Supporters of Brazil's former President Jair Bolsonaro released from federal police headquarters. And Golden Globe resumes in-person ceremony to award the best of the best in film and television.
Thank you so much.
Defense Secretary-designate Carlito Galvez Jr. urges senior defense officials to stay in place as 7 department officials have already resigned. The Department of National Defense, or DND, says Galvez gave the instruction to all the members of the department's executive committee and heads of all DND bureaus. The DND held a transition briefing with Galvez in Camp Aguinaldo, where a formal report was presented to the Defense Secretary-designate. The briefing included the 10-point agenda initiated by resigned DND officer in charge, Jose Faustino Jr. The DND quoted Galvez saying he will sustain the gains of the past secretaries and will also further enhance the capability of the national defense. Galvez also cited the importance of employee morale in the department and professionalism in the armed forces of the Philippines. Prior to the transition briefing, Galvez met privately with Faustino. Faustino briefed the incoming official on the accomplishments of the DND and gave recommendations to ensure continuity.
Senior defense officials heeded a call of Defense Secretary-designate Carlito Galvez to stay in their positions. Mar Gabriel reports on why these officials did not submit their courtesy resignations.
Senior defense officials assured Defense Secretary-designate Carlito Galvez Jr. of their full support. After the New Year's call in Camp Aguinaldo, Defense Undersecretary Angelito De Leon said the senior defense officials agreed to stay in their positions. He clarified that their submission of a courtesy resignation is normal procedure to give the new leadership a free hand to choose his people.
Una sa lahat, everyone stays on. And let us continue and focus with the mandate of the Defense Department and the One Defense Team, including its bureaus and the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Hindi na po namin pinag-usapan. Ang importante po rito ay we move forward and address the mandate of the Defense Department.
On Tuesday, Galvez held an executive session with resigned Defense OIC and retired General Jose Faustino Jr. with other executive committee and other officials of DND bureaus. The discussion centered on the continuation of Faustino's 10-point agenda and the One Defense Team.
Nagbigay rin po siya ng kautusan na gaya nga po ng nasabi ni Director Agila that we should all hit the ground running, so to speak. Including, as proof, yung ngayon po, on the second day of the job, our Secretary of National Defense designated to the President visiting disaster-stricken areas in northern Mindanao at kasama din po dito, jive with this visit, our field units.
Amid the change in leadership in the Armed Forces of the Philippines, De Leon said there is no need for a loyalty check among the military ranks. He also assured the high morale among members of the two organizations. Mar Gabriel, for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines, or AFP, shrugs off demands to investigate the rumored destabilization plot against the Marcos administration. AFP spokesman Colonel Medel Aguilar says there is nothing irregular with the recent change of leadership in the armed forces, that it is within the law. The president, as the commander-in-chief, is empowered to appoint the chief of staff. Recently, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. reappointed General Andres Centino as AFP chief of staff, replacing Lieutenant General Bartolome Bacaro, who held the position for only 5 months. Aguilar adds that the military understands that officers come and go. They follow the change of command to keep the organization united. Aguilar states the 3-year term for the AFP chief of staff is a good thing for the military, but admits there are birth pains to deal with.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. visited victims of shear line and floodings in Misamis Occidental. The president distributed more than 16 million pesos in assistance to affected residents. Eden Santos reports.
Strong rains did not hamper President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. from personally attending to the needs of shearline victims in Misamis Occidental. The president's plane attempted 3 times before it landed because of bad weather at the Ozamis City Airport. Instead of his original schedule to visit Oroquieta City, President Marcos was briefed in Misamis Occidental with Governor Henry Wominal. The president was also not able to conduct an ocular inspection of the affected areas. In Misamis Occidental, more than 16,000 families or 56,853 individuals were affected by inclement weather in 155 barangays. 3,122 families or 9,928 individuals were temporarily sheltered in 41 evacuation centers. After meeting with affected families, President Marcos distributed relief goods to residents of Tudela Misamis Occidental and cash allowance worth 16 million pesos. Some 55.81 million pesos worth of financial assistance from the Assistance to Individuals in Crisis Situations, or AICS, were provided to 11,133 beneficiaries in Misamis provinces, while 8.67 million pesos were distributed to 1,733 beneficiaries in Oroquieta City. The president also instructed the Department of Public Works and Highways to hasten the repair of damaged roads, bridges, and other infrastructure. Marcos instructed as well the National Housing Authority, or NHA, to look for a resettlement area for Misamis Occidental residents whose houses were damaged by the flooding. Eden Santos for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Senate supports President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in his reluctance to extend the state of calamity due to COVID-19. Senate leadership said the move could have negative effects, especially now that the country is opening its economy. Madeline Villar Moratillo reports.
The Senate is working on the passage of proposed legislation that could be the basis for the government's COVID-19 response. Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri made the assurance following the expiration of the state of calamity due to COVID-19 last December 31, 2022. Zubiri is referring to the proposed establishment of the Center for Disease Prevention and the Virology Institute, which are both pending before the plenary. The 2 proposed bills have been approved in the House of Representatives. Zubiri says he understands the hesitancy on the part of President Marcos Jr. to extend the state of calamity because of the possible negative effects on the country's economy.
I think there's reasons why may rason po ang ating Pangulo na hindi niya po pinirmahan or hihingin sa amin ang extension ng state of calamity. Unang-una, hindi maganda sa imahe ng Pilipinas na pag tinignan po ng mga turista, pag pumunta sila online, meron pa rin state of calamity for COVID-19. Para ang dating nun, parang China na yun. Sobrang dami natin COVID-19, hindi natin nakokontrol. Ang punto lang is, of course, ayaw po sirahin ang imahe ng presidente. Tuloy-tuloy pamimigay po ng bakuna, may special powers yung there's special powers yung DOA. So that is why we are focusing on the passage of the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, and the Virology Institute. So yes, if you ask me, I support the President's non-extension of the COVID vaccine state of calamity or the COVID-19 state of calamity, because it really will paint a bad light on the Philippines.
Health Officer in charge, Maria Rosario Vergere, said they already submitted to the President their recommendation for the state of calamity extension. She said the recommendation is until the enactment of the CDC bill.
So for that state of calamity extension, we have already submitted our memo for the President before December 31 last year. And accordingly, mukhang hindi pa nadedesisyonan, but he has verbalized in one of his media outings that he is quite hesitant to extend the state of calamity.
But even in the absence of the state of calamity, Vergere assured that the government's vaccination program will continue. The vaccines that were given Emergency Use Authorization or EUA could be used for another year according to the law. The DOH said there are still more than 17.4 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines stored in warehouses. Madeline Villar Moratillo for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The World Health Organization, or WHO, reports that only 36.8% of 5 to 11-year-olds in the Philippines are vaccinated. In its COVID-19 situation report, the WHO stressed the warnings of health experts that unvaccinated children have the highest probability of virus infections. It reminded parents to inoculate their children against COVID-19 as the government eases health protocols and resumes face-to-face classes. mRNA and other approved vaccines have the ability to protect children and other priority groups like senior citizens, individuals with comorbidities, and infants.
The Philippine Chamber of Agriculture Food Incorporated, or PCAFI, appealed to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. to consider the welfare of local farmers before approving the importation of agricultural products. PCAFI President Danilo Fausto says the government should first buy locally grown products to help farmers prosper. Attorney Elias Jose Inchong, President of the United Broiler Raisers Association, said the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, should review the government's policy on the importation of agricultural products. Inchong said NEDA should not only look at the interests of importers, but also the concerns of local farmers who are disadvantaged when the government prioritizes imports. Inchong believes that NEDA is being used by unscrupulous cartel of agricultural products because of its importation policy.
The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, conducted today a special satellite registration for inmates of the New Bilibid prison and other jails under the Bureau of Corrections, or BUCOR. Retired Army General Jovito Palparan Jr. is among those who registered. Moira Encina reports.
More than 2,000 inmates from the New Bilibid prison can participate in future elections as the COMELEC conducts a special satellite registration for persons deprived of liberty, or PDLs. COMELEC Chairperson George Erwin Garcia and other poll body commissioners supervise the voters' registration in Bilibid. BUCOR said more than 2,000 qualified inmates from Bilibid can register. Most of them are from the maximum security compound with 1,879 inmates. The nationwide special satellite registration was simultaneously conducted in other jails operated by BUCOR. This is the first time the poll body conducted a satellite registration in Bilibid after the Supreme Court left the TRO issued, now allowing PDLs to participate in both local and national elections.
Ipapangako po namin sa inyo, pabibilisin po natin ang mga proseso. Pakisabi niyo lang po sa ibang mga kasamahan po natin.
The inmates were elated that they were given the opportunity to register and to exercise their right to vote.
Napaka-importante nito na kabilang pa rin kami sa mga mamamayan sa labas kahit na nandito kami sa loob.
Mahalaga po sa akin ang makaboto ako kasi katunayan ko, isa po pong botante. Tumanda na po ako sa pagboto po.
Among the registrants was Bilibid inmate and retired Army Major General Jovito Palparan Jr. Palparan was jailed for kidnapping and serious illegal detention charges in relation to the disappearance of 2 UP students in 2006. From military detention, Palparan was transferred to Bilibid in 2018. COMELEC personnel obtained Palparan's biometrics, photo, thumb mark, and signature, which are part of the voters' registration process. But Bucor officials refused the media from interviewing Palparan, saying it needs authorization from the DOJ. Comelec clarified that inmates with no final conviction are still qualified to register and vote. Also qualified to register are PDLs or serving less than 1 year jail time and inmates undergoing trial in courts.
Yung ikatlong klase po ng PDL ay whose conviction of a crime involving disloyalty to the duly constituted government such as rebellion, sedition, violation of firearms law, or any crime against national security or any other crime on appeal. So kahit po convicted na siya, nandito na po siya sa New Bilibid prisons, pero undergoing appeal. So lahat po sila hindi nawawala ang karapatang magrehistro at makaboto.
Boydie Insina from Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Coming up, several people are injured in a stabbing attack at a train station in Perry. Parts of California are drowning in endless storms and floods. And Peru orders a 3-night curfew to curb violent protests. Mata ng Agila International will be back after a short break.
Selfie ka ba kasama ang Net25 Agila? Tumutok sa Net25 at abangan ang announcement namin ng mga nanalo ng 5 iPhones. Tatlong 100,000.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. A stabbing attack occurred at the Gardenor railway station in Pari today. At least 6 people were injured, including a police officer. The attack happened at 6:40 in the morning local time, and France's national state-owned railway company reports the suspect was also injured and evacuated from the crime scene. An investigation is ongoing to determine the attacker's motive. The station is now operating and running normally.
A number of civilians have died in a shelling of Donetsk's homes by Ukraine. Apartment buildings were damaged as intense fighting continues between Ukrainian forces and Russian forces. Roman Kosarev of RT News reports.
This street, several houses were destroyed by the multiple launch rocket systems Grad. This fragment of a shell cannot be extracted at the moment. Now, the house behind me, luckily, the residents have left a long time ago. However, there are several families on the street who recall what happened.
I was here during the attack. It was really awful, sitting and wondering whether it would strike here. A neighbor's garage was hit, and half his house was destroyed. It's been really difficult for him.
These fragments all impacted here at different times, starting with the Soviet mortars in 2014, and these are already new NATO 155mm shells. These look like Czech shells. We examined everything, how they flew here and what destruction they caused. We, those who survived, have examined this all many times.
Yuri considers himself lucky to be alive, as his house was shelled several times over all these years. But his property is being damaged time and again. He's just one of thousands of people here in Donbass who suffered as a result of Ukrainian artillery shelling. And of course, the locals hope that all Ukrainian war crimes will finally face justice. Roman Kosarev, RT, Donetsk Republic.
The Pentagon has confirmed Ukrainian troops will receive Patriot air defense training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Air Force Brigadier General Patrick Ryder says the first rotation of Kiev troops is so far the only one planned. But he maintains Washington will keep the dialogue open in terms of any potential future training. As of now, Ryder says they focus on training soldiers to operate the Patriot defense.
I can confirm that training for Ukrainian forces on the Patriot air defense system will begin as soon as next week at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. The training will prepare approximately 90 to 100 Ukrainian soldiers to operate, maintain, and sustain the defensive system over a training course expected to last several months. And once fielded, the Patriot will continue to contribute to Ukraine's air defense capabilities and provide another capability to the Ukrainian people to defend themselves against Russia's ongoing aerial assaults.
Reuters says they selected soldiers who already have an air, defense, artillery background. Though the Pentagon did not announce an official timeline, Reuters says the training will be expedited to ensure the soldiers will return to Kiev as quickly as possible.
The World Bank expects the global economy to face a broad-based slowdown in 2023 with a growth rate of 1.7%. This is amid high inflation and interest rates. A director of the bank's prospects group says there will be a very difficult outlook for the next 3 years. He says this is the type of protracted weakness that is seen.
In our baseline, we do not see a global recession. 1.7% growth is weak, but it is not a technical global recession. Now, there is a menu of risks, and that menu is very large. Inflation can stay elevated, interest rates can go up higher or remain high. You have geopolitical tensions, you have risks associated with food insecurity, energy insecurity. There might be more COVID outbreaks. So there are risks associated with, of course, climate change. In the near term, the risk we are focusing on is the possibility of financial stress if interest rates go up higher at the global level. And of course, if they go up higher at the global level, inflation remains persistent, that could trigger a global recession.
In the U.S., nonstop rains and floods ravaged several cities in California. The rains have been blamed for the deaths of at least 17 people. Ivan Sanchez tells us more.
On this 10th day of the new year, Los Angeles County residents remain besieged by a severe weather pattern. After a bomb cyclone hit the entirety of California last Thursday, a second storm pattern arrived in Southern California, bringing heavy rain to the Los Angeles area in the last 24 hours, with two local cities, Porter Ranch and Woodland Hills, each receiving 6 inches of rain since yesterday. While California is in great need of precipitation after several years of drought and annual wildfires, the soil condition is so dry that it cannot absorb the heavy rains quickly enough, causing street and freeway flooding, mudslides in local mountainous regions, and infrastructure damage, specifically causing power outages affecting more than 200,000 businesses and residents within the state and at least 14 deaths since yesterday. 80 miles away in Santa Barbara, flooding led to the closing of both sides of the 101 freeway. Potholes, including one big enough that it engulfed 2 cars in Chatsworth last night, also developed from rain-caused erosion. Residents of hillside communities have been told to be on standby for evacuation orders, which usually direct victims to local high schools or community colleges set up as evacuation centers. California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency last week prior to the bomb cyclone. Yesterday, President Biden declared a federal state of emergency for California, designating emergency resources to further alleviate the impact of these storms and to prevent further destruction. Residents anxiously await additional rain forecasted for the remainder of the week, as California finds itself in the middle of the strongest jet stream of storms since 2005. Ivan Sanchez, Los Angeles, California. Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Chaos is emerging as Pakistan's flour crisis develops. Crowds form around a few trucks delivering subsidized bags of flour on a daily basis. Armed guards accompany the trucks to protect the vital and increasingly scarce commodity. A video of one such delivery emerged on social media. It showed desperate civilians chasing the trucks and mopeds. With cash in hand, they begged to buy one of the few remaining bags.
In New York, thousands of nurses in 2 of the city's biggest hospitals have taken to the streets for 2 days now. They demand solutions to the unreasonable workloads that they carry. In Manhattan, Joan Soriano speaks with those on the picket line.
Not all heroes wear capes. Some of them wear scrubs. Nurses were hailed as the frontline heroes of the pandemic. Today, thousands of nurses in New York are on strike for better patient care and working conditions. Today is the second day of strikes, which began on Monday at 7 a.m., with 7,000 nurses striking at two major hospitals in New York City, Mount Sinai Hospital and Montefiore, Bronx. Nurses at other hospitals were able to reach agreements before the strike. This is the largest nursing strike in decades. Chronic understaffing, low pay, and long hours are driving nurses to burnout. Nurse-to-patient ratios are a main driving point of negotiations, citing the risk of patient safety.
We're here for our patients first and foremost. That's why we're out here today. We want strict staffing ratios and enforcement language. That's why we're here. We need to hold the hospital accountable for when they continually short-staff us.
At a time when COVID cases, RSV, and the flu are at a high, hospitals say the timing could not be worse. Many have voiced their support for nurses, including the Philippine Consulate General in New York, who stand by the Filipino-American nurses who care for the sick and dying at the expense of their own lives.
I'm here to support the nurses here so that they can retain more nurses and find a safe staffing ratio here. Let's go!
The Nurses Association stressed to New Yorkers to not delay getting hospital care during the strike. Patients should seek hospital care immediately if they need it. Joanne Soriano, New York, New York. Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The leaders of the United States, Mexico, and Canada gathered for the North American Leaders Summit. They seek to deepen regional economic integration and boost cooperation in clean energy despite simmering trade tensions. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador welcomed his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at the National Palace in Mexico City. They conduct three-way talks, also known as the Three Amigos Summit. Meeting Trudeau on the sidelines, Biden says the countries have unlimited economic potential when they work together. He promises to visit Canada in March for the first time as president. Biden says the U.S. and Canada should be the clean energy powerhouses of the world. The U.S. President revived the Three Amigos Summit in 2021. He seeks to restore normalcy to the three-way partnership after his predecessor Donald Trump shelved the regional summit.
Peru has declared a curfew in the southern region to suppress violent protests. Prime Minister Alberto Otarola says the three-night curfew will run from 8 in the evening to 4 in the morning.
Deploro esta agresión contra la fuerza del orden. Y una vez más, llamamos al orden, a la paz y a la tranquilidad de todos los peruanos. No podemos estar asesinándonos entre nosotros.
Prime Minister Alberto Otarola says Peru is not an authoritarian regime. It has an obligation to protect the security of all Peruvians. 18 people were killed in clashes between demonstrators and security forces. Otarola says the government remains solidly focused on its political action plan to pacify the country. A police report says one policeman was beaten and another one handcuffed. Otarola deplores this aggression against the forces of law and order. He calls for peace and tranquility for all Peruvians, emphasizing they should not murder each other. Protests erupted a month ago when authorities arrested former President Pedro Castillo over graft investigations. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office says they are opening a genocide investigation against current President Dina Boluarte and other top officials. The United Nations office in Peru implored authorities to take urgent measures to ensure the respect of human rights.
Iran has sentenced the daughter of former Iranian President Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani to 5 years in prison. Local reports say Faize Hashemi is in prison with other charges against her. Her lawyer claims her ruling is at its initial stage and is not yet final. A news agency says Tehran's prosecutor indicted Faize in 2022 on charges of propaganda against the system. Sources say Faize is a known Iranian activist. She has been jailed several times for making anti-government statements. Over the past few months, Iran has arrested a number of renowned activists amid growing protests. Up next, supporters of Brazil's former President Jair Bolsonaro are released from federal police headquarters. An arrest warrant is issued against Pakistan's former prime minister. And China stops issuing visas to South Korea in retaliation for entry restrictions. Mata ng Agila International will be back with more global news. Please stay tuned.
Obserbasyon na ang negosyo ng pagpapaganda ay siguradong patok kung ito ay mapapatakbo ng maayos at mahusay. Kaya naman napakaraming beauty salons ang ating nakikita sa ating paligid. And there's a way to build a beauty salon business via franchising. Imagine no need to start from scratch because you have the support readily available. Let's find out how we can increase our income through the salon business together with Dr. Arthur Cruzada of Queen Eva Salon.
Na-enjoy ko yung business na to. Sabi ko, siguro nasa blood na rin talaga. My mission is dumami yung name ni Nanay and then may maiwan na magandang legacy yung pangalan ni Nanay sa larangan ng beauty.
Open for business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
Supporters of Brazil's far-right former President Jair Bolsonaro have been released. They leave the federal office or police headquarters on a bus after undergoing identity and criminal record checks. They were detained for possible involvement in vandalism during the invasions of Congress, the presidential palace, and the Supreme Court in Brasilia. Ex-President Jair Bolsonaro tweeted a photo of himself in a hospital bed in the United States. This was one day after his supporters drew international condemnation by invading the seat of power in Brasilia. Bolsonaro traveled to Orlando, Florida, 2 days before the end of his term on December 31st. The former Brazilian leader was stabbed in the abdomen in an attack that nearly claimed his life during his winning campaign in 2018. He has undergone multiple surgeries since.
Meanwhile, members of social movements marched in defense of democracy in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The demonstrations began a day after supporters of ex-President Jair Bolsonaro rioted in Brasilia. The social movement advocates say the uproar is in response to the barbarism that took place in the capital city. As they take to the streets, demonstrators insist that people need to respect and strengthen democracy. President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva took office on January 1 after a divisive election win over Bolsonaro. Da Silva has returned to work in the presidential palace. Witnesses say wreckage is everywhere after the previous day's havoc. Trashed offices, shattered doors, and broken glass are the scenes in Brasilia.
The Election Commission of Pakistan, or ECP, has issued arrest warrants for former Prime Minister Imran Khan and other top leaders of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, or PTI party. They are being charged with contempt for failing to appear in a hearing. They must secure bail by January the 17th. Khan was one of the 3 people seeking exoneration from attending the case. The Supreme Court of Pakistan heard proceedings against Khan and PTI members last week over alleged controversial remarks made against the electoral body. During the previous hearing, the ECP gave PTI leaders one last chance to appear before the commission. It warned them that their absence at the next hearing could result in the issuance of arrest warrants. In the High Court, the PTI leaders have sought declaratory relief from the charges.
The Chinese embassy in Seoul has announced they will stop issuing short-term visas to South Korean citizens. These include visas for business, tourism, medical treatment, transit, and general private affairs. In a statement, the embassy says these measures will be adjusted if South Korea cancels its discriminatory entry restrictions on China. Beijing's move is seen as the country's first retaliation against COVID entry restrictions on arrivals from China. On January 2, South Korea suspended short-term visa applications from its consulates in China until the end of the month. It also requires people traveling from China to take a PCR test within 24 hours of arrival and remain in isolation until receiving negative results. On January 5, Seoul added even more restrictions. Travelers from China must present a negative PCR test taken within 48 hours of departure or a rapid antigen test taken within 24 hours. The United States and several European nations have also imposed travel restrictions on Beijing. However, China believes these entry restrictions lack scientific basis and are unacceptable. They insist these are attempts to manipulate COVID measures for political purposes.
China's ambassador to Australia has warned the country to be wary of its relationship with Japan. Beijing's envoy Xiao Qian reminds that Japanese troops attacked Australia during World War II and says history might repeat itself. Xiao's comments came after a journalist asked about remarks made by the Japanese ambassador to Australia, Shingo Yamagami, who said Australia and Japan should remain vigilant in relation to China. The Chinese ambassador says Yamagami's comments overstepped his role as ambassador. Xiao asserts an ambassador's role is to promote understanding, friendship, and cooperation. But he adds he will not stop Australia from developing a normal relationship with another nation.
Zhao Lijian, a brash and outspoken diplomat called Beijing's wolf warrior, no longer serves as a foreign ministry spokesperson. Zhao took up the post of spokesperson in 2020. He once claimed that coronavirus had probably been manufactured by the United States military, bringing it to China during the 2019 Military World Games in Wuhan. He also accused Japan of endangering the world by irresponsibly discharging nuclear-tainted water into the Pacific.
赵立坚同志根据工作需要交流任职。中国始终坚持维护世界和平、促进共同发展的外交政策宗旨，致力于推动构建人类命运共同体。坚持在和平共处五项原则基础上，同各国发展友好合作，同时在事关中国主权、安全、发展利益等原则。
Chinese authorities say Zhao will take up a position as the Deputy Director General of Beijing's Department of Boundary and Ocean Affairs. The position requires negotiating maritime and land boundaries with neighboring countries. Zhao will also take part in joint inspections and joint developments. His latest appointment is part of a broader reshuffle of Beijing's diplomatic leadership.
French leftist deputy Francois Ruffin has denounced the government's proposed law to reform pensions. He says it will work against social carers, forklift drivers, and maids. The deputy states the proposed law is an obvious social and democratic issue for workers. He stresses that these workers should be given importance as they work for the economy but are paid poorly. The deputy claims French President Emmanuel Macron knows that 80% of workers oppose the reform.
In the Netherlands, the government continues its fight against illegal drugs. Dutch customs and prosecution authorities reveal their 2022 cocaine seizures. They say the amount seized in Rotterdam is lower than what it was in 2021. However, the Rotterdam chief public prosecutor says cocaine-related violence is heavier despite the drop in seizures.
It's an important question that you ask, because one of my big worries is in what we see happening. And what we see happening is that the violence involved with cocaine is becoming heavier and heavier. On a daily basis, we have shootings. in Rotterdam, shooting at each other, shooting at houses, explosives on houses, intimidation. What we see is that the violence is becoming more and more excessive. And that's a trend that we have to turn down, that we have to change.
The newest Henley Passport Index ranks the Philippine passport as 78th in the world, up 2 spots from its previous ranking. Holders of the Philippine passport can enter 67 destinations without a visa. Sharing the rank with the Philippines is Uganda. Japan retains first place as the most powerful passport for another consecutive year, with access to 193 destinations visa-free. South Korea and Singapore share second place with visa-free visits to 192 destinations. Germany and Spain both sit at third place with access to 190 destinations. Finland, Italy, and Luxembourg are all ranked 5th. The Henley Passport Index rates the world travel documents based on the number of destinations its holders can enter visa-free. The quarterly index based its ranking on 199 passports and 227 destinations.
Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, is sinking at an alarming rate. The country's top architects face the daunting task of designing a new, sustainable and green capital city in the middle of the world's oldest stretch of jungle. An obstacle to construction is the protection of native animals and plant species. According to an operational manager at the Arsari Orangutan Sanctuary, the biggest challenge they face is the future of orangutans. Their home shrinks day by day due to human construction of infrastructure. A mangrove activist says the role of mangroves on the coast is like a filter that preserves the sustainability of marine biotas. The activist adds that if the mangroves are damaged, it will reflect on the natural habitats of marine biotas. In the long run, it will impact the economy and affect the livelihood of fishermen. A tribe leader says he hopes the government gives attention to their future. They do not want to become strangers on their own lands. Meanwhile, the architect designing the new capital says she is concerned about rushing things to happen, which might have repercussions in the end. Coming right up, the U.S. Federal Reserve chairperson says the central bank is not a climate policy maker.
Pleasure and an honor to be.
Football star Lionel Messi is set to make his first PSG appearance since the World Cup. And the Golden Globes resumes in-person ceremony to award the best of the best in film and television. Catch more of Mata ng Agila International as we return.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Chairperson Jerome Powell says the U.S. Federal Reserve will not be a climate policy maker. Powell says it would be inappropriate to use the central bank's tools for climate goals. He states some analysts have raised the idea of incorporating climate change risks in bank supervision. He stresses, however, that decisions about climate change policies should be made by the elected branches of government to reflect the public's will.
Including the public reasonably expects supervisors to require that banks understand and can appropriately manage their material risks, including the financial risks of climate change. But without explicit congressional legislation, it would be inappropriate for us to use our monetary policy or supervisory tools, for example, to promote a greener economy or to achieve other climate-based goals. We are not, and we will not be, a climate policy maker.
Powell notes that restoring price stability amid soaring inflation can require measures that are not popular. Fed policymakers have raised interest rates to slow down the economy, and the Fed raised the benchmark lending rate 7 times last year as the U.S. grapples with decades-high inflation.
Uniqlo's parent company announced Wednesday it would increase the salaries of thousands of its employees in Japan. Wages will grow by up to 40% to make the company globally competitive. The salary bump will benefit around 8,400 full-time employees working for the fast retailing parent company in Japan. However, the wage raise will vary across staff categories. Salaries of newly hired employees will bump by less than 20%. The increase in managerial wages and those with more experience could exceed 40% this year. With globally aligned criteria for the salary increase, the company hopes it will contribute to the growth of workers and their further global competitiveness.
Lionel Messi is set to make his first appearance for Paris Saint-Germain since his World Cup win. He will play in a League One match-up today against the Angers. The 35-year-old joined his teammates for training on Tuesday. After the World Cup, the football star was granted a 14-day holiday back in his home country of Argentina. When he returned to Paris, he was given a guard of honor at PSG's training ground last Wednesday. Negotiations for Messi's contract with PSG are ongoing. His 2-year deal in Paris is about to end. The Qatar-owned club is considering to be the Argentinian down to a new contract.
After a 1-year break from in-person award ceremonies, the Golden Globes are back for another star-studded night on its 80th year. It went live earlier today in Beverly Hills, California to award the best of the best in film and television. The dark comedy Banshees of Inisherin took home 3 prizes, or 3 top prizes: Best Motion Picture for Musical or Comedy, Best Screenplay, and Best Actor for Colin Farrell. Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans took home the Best Motion Picture for Drama, with Spielberg taking home the Best Director award. The Philippines' historic Best Actress nominee Dolly De Leon lost to Angela Bassett for Black Panther Wakanda Forever, but nevertheless made the country proud. Austin Butler and Cate Blanchett were honored with Best Actor and Best Actress for Drama, while Michelle Yeoh bagged the Best Actress award for musical or comedy. For television, the big winners were the Game of Thrones prequel The House of the Dragon, The White Lotus, and Abbott Elementary. The awards night was hosted by Jared Carmichael.
Giant illuminated balloons in wacky shapes glow in the dark as crowds gaze from below at a fair in Envigado, Colombia. A balloon builder says the new lunar fair brings happiness to people. They can enjoy the lights and festivities. Some balloons shown at the fair were Lionel Messi's giant jersey and animal shapes like an octopus, owl, fish and jellyfish. An organizer says the coolest and biggest balloon they made is a 7-meter kraken, a giant octopus that covered all the grandstands of the arena. And to help you go through this week, here is a quote from George Adair, a real estate developer. Everything you've ever wanted is sitting on the other side of fear.
You know, fear really does get in the way of a lot of things like ambition and setting goals.
Yes, and you know what, as the millennials say, YOLO. You only live once.
Well, that's true. So set your fear aside and eyes on the prize.
And of course we know that, Nina, because we're still part of the millennials, right?
So true. We are, aren't we?
And of course, that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Ricky Mathay.
And I am Nina Richie Lago Flores, asking you to stay tuned for tonight's episode of Counterpoint with Attorney Salvador Panelo and San Manuel Tarlac Mayor Doña Tesoro. This is Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.